Thank you so much for being here with us today. Really excited to be here with John Schu and Tony Weaver in this incredible conversation. Let's give it a round of applause. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to have y'all spending time and sharing space with us. I think first off, we're just gonna do easy peasy question. Just let us know about y'all's books for people who haven't maybe read them yet. What maybe just in general a little bit about you, what you write, but maybe specifically what Louder Than Hunger and Weirdo.
Do you want to go first?
You got it.
All right. You want me to go first? Yeah. All right. So I am John Schu, and I am not from Texas, which means I'm struggling with allergies up here. So I apologize about my voice today. But I used to be a third grade teacher, and I thought I would be a third grade teacher forever. And then I got promoted to fourth grade, as I always tell students. And I loved being a fourth grade teacher. And then I went to library school to learn how to be a librarian. And one day my principal asked me if I would please become the librarian where I was a homeroom teacher. And I said no, because I wanted to be in the classroom for a bit more. But I'm so grateful I said yes. And for 9 years, I was a teacher librarian, and I loved every single day. And let's give all of the teacher librarians in the room a big round of applause. And then I left my job to become the ambassador of school libraries, which was a very, very fancy made-up job. And for almost 6 years, I would travel all over the world, reminding people that every child deserves to go to a school with a full-time school librarian who actually has a budget, that going to a school with a full-time school librarian with a budget should never be seen as a privilege, but as a right. And I'm grateful for all the librarians here and all of the supporters of libraries. So my first book is called This Is a Story, because I know a lot about story. I know a lot about libraries, and it's my love letter to libraries and librarians. And then I wrote a book called This Is a School, which is my love letter to school, because I know a lot about school. And people were not surprised when I published those books, because I've spent my whole career talking about those things. But people were quite surprised when this year I published a book called Louder Than Hunger, which is about a boy named Jake Stacy. And it's intentional that Jake Stacy and I have the same initials. And the reason I name him Jake Stacy is because when I was a kid, I played school almost every single day. And all of my students were imaginary. And my favorite imaginary student was Jake Stacy. And thankfully, we have the same initials. So in Louder Than Hunger, you meet Jake when he is spiraling out of control, because there's this very loud inner saboteur in his brain that tells him that he's worthless and tells him that he doesn't deserve to take up space in this world. And so Jake takes away food from himself. And in the second act of the book, he's hospitalized in a facility called the Whispering Pines. And the reason I name it Whispering Pines is because I was hospitalized for 2 years. And for 7 months, I was in a facility called Linden Oaks. And I wanted it to sound like Linden Oaks, but I didn't want Linden Oaks to sue me by calling it Linden Oaks. And I am obsessed with the Golden Girls. And I wanted it to sound like Shady Pines, a place that Sophia has always threatened to be sent back to. So in the second act of the book, Jake is hospitalized, and right away, based on the DSM at the time, he's diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. And then as he starts to refeed, he's diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, and anxiety, all things that I struggled with as a teenager. And eventually, thanks to theater and Idina Menzel and a little musical called Rent, Jake starts to heal. So that's Louder Than Hunger. And I'm going to give away 3 copies right now, because I'm actually like the Oprah of books. Okay, I'm done.
Incredible.
Sorry.
So I'm glad I let John go first, because at events like this, there's always a question of okay, so Tony, how much energy are you allowed to bring? How much space can you actually take up? Because as someone with the BFA in theater, we got to know our audience, right? It's how much can you actually do? But I love this because you just open the door. It's no, you can have as much energy as you want.
Yes.
This is actually great. My name is Tony Weaver Jr. And unfortunately, I don't have any copies of Weirdo. My friend,
No,
my
I
good friend,
brought one,
my
which
good
I'll
friend
give away.
Dylan here, let me borrow their copy so I can hold it up here because Weirdo is currently sold out at the distributor level. I can't find it. I can't buy it. I don't know. I'm looking. I'm searching for the book. I don't know.
I did buy one last week in Chicago, so I can give it to you. No, keep going.
Literally the Oprah of books. Literally, even you get your book. You get a book, even if that book is your book. You get it. So the way I am the author of a graphic novel called Weirdo, and I call Weirdo the nerdy kid's instruction manual for self-love and self-confidence. It is a graphic novel memoir that chronicles my personal experience navigating depression, anxiety, and ultimately me attempting to end my own life as a middle school student. Because when I was younger, I was nerdy. And I struggled a lot with my self-esteem and learning how to come to grips with who I was. The reason that I wrote Weirdo is because when I was younger, I thought that the issues pertaining to mental health that I was dealing with were an individual problem. I thought it was a Tony thing. I thought it was a Tony issue. But as I got older, what I realized is that there are a lot of people that struggle to love what they see when they look in the mirror. When we look at statistics right now, youth rates of depression and anxiety are the highest that they've been since we started measuring. 1 in every 10 young people will one day decide that they are going to attempt to not be here anymore. 10% of our kids, all of which that we love, all of which that deserve happiness, all of which that deserve to see themselves represented, come to this dark place where they feel as though it's better to not see tomorrow. And as someone who experienced that darkness firsthand, when I was in that place, the thing that saved me was stories. Comics, anime, manga, video games, all these underrepresented heroes choosing to continue moving forward even when they felt profoundly unequipped to accomplish their goals. Gave me the courage that I needed to continue moving forward, but I didn't feel like my existence had value. So as a young person, the promise that I made was that since stories saved my life, as soon as I got the opportunity, I would use stories to save other people. And that promise has led me to a variety of places. I run a nonprofit organization called Weird Enough Productions, where over the course of the last 5 years, we brought comics and mental health curricula to the hands of over 2 million students across the U.S. When COVID shut schools down and kids were struggling and didn't necessarily have a place where they could gather, that journey led me to TikTok and Instagram, where I started making videos talking about nerddom, talking about self-love, and talking about finding yourself in stories that has amassed me an audience of about 1 million weird kids that are loving who they are. And that journey has also brought me here today. Weirdo was published by Macmillan, their second imprint, on September 17th of this year. And since then, I've just kind of been trying to help everybody embrace their inner weird kid. So, yeah.
Yeah. Can I give my copy away?
Okay, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a reader of heart and soul.
I'm obsessed already. This is great. This is such good energy. So excited and like a little bit terrified, and I feel like that's where I like being usually in my life. So before we get into the conversation full throttle, I just wanted to do a really quick icebreaker for John, as Jake, as a musical lover. Assuming that's also you in your daily life, I would love to know like what your maybe like 1, 2, or top 3 musicals are.
I can talk about musicals all day. So as I shared, I wrote a book called This Is a School. I wrote a book called This Is a Story. And I submitted the third idea, which my editor passed on, which was called This Is a Theater. And she said, if sales are good enough for This Is a School and This Is a Story, I'll reconsider it. And during almost every presentation, I would say, if you want me to write This Is a Theater, you have to buy This Is a School. And I've now sold This Is a Theater. So thank you, librarians. So to answer your question, I saw Waitress on Broadway 38 times because I love Sarah Bareilles. So my favorite musical is Waitress, and the runner-up is Rent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess follow up, how excited are we for Wicked?
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it next week in Boston.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
Love that.
The The Wild Party by Andrew Lippa. Any love for The Wild Party?
It's not one of my favorites.
I get you. I understand.
I want to share one more thing about Wicked though. I love Target. Like I am a spokesperson for Target, as Becky Calzada knows, and I love at Target right now. They have a whole Wicked display, and 2 weeks ago the I Am Elphaba Little Golden book came out, and I've been buying lots of them to give away.
I feel like a Wicked section as a Target proves that pride does exist all year long. Yes. That really is what it tells me. Tony, I would love if you have like a Super Smash Bros. Top 3 as your character. Little Tony is just so. That was like the first thing that hit in there, and I was like, I need to know.
I'm glad you caught that. The Super Smash Brothers reference is like 2 pages in. I'm a Marth main.
I will see a reference.
In Super Smash Brothers, the character Marth, he's a swordsman from the Fire Emblem franchise. And the things that I love about Marth are 2 things. Number 1, his sword is the longest sword in the game, so you can't get close to me. Don't. Hey, stay back there. But also, he has a counter. So if you do get close to me and you try to land a hit, if I get scared, I can counter and it'll block. So Marth is like my play style, and unfortunately, I don't even have a top 3 because I only play Marth. I need that security blanket. I need to be able to
mine is Inkling, and I feel like I really want a Marth versus Inkling match at one day. This is my new goal. Cool, I love that. Now to get into some questions about y'all's books, about the themes, writing, all these sort of things. One thing that I really noticed very quickly is that both of these stories come from personal moments in your own lives, and especially so difficult moments in your lives. That's something that I get asked whenever I sort of write scenes like that in my own stories is how am I making sure I'm looking out for myself whenever I'm drafting and revising those sort of scenes. What advice would you offer to that question of how do you sort of keep control of yourself and emotionally and where your head's at in writing sort of tough scenes or tough storylines like that?
Yeah. Do you want to go?
I think that for me, the process that's been helpful for me, which is a little bit antithetical to the question because we're thinking about how do you protect yourself when writing these things? What I tell myself is I'm writing for young people that are struggling and that are in the dark, and they don't get the option to flick it on and off. So when I'm writing, I'm like, if we're going there, then you're gonna go there. We're gonna go. We're gonna visit that place again. I need you to go back to that place. And a part of me is like, I can't. My strength as a writer fades if I ever forget what it feels like to be that helpless child. For context, my mom was a public school educator, and since she cared so much about education, the school that I end up in Weirdo is a school that is about 2 hours from my house that I have to take 3 buses to get to every morning because it's a magnet school, it's the fancy school, it's the high achiever school. And my mom is like, I'm sending you there because I want you to have access to these materials and resources. But when I get to the school, I'm one of the only black students in my classes, and I'm accused of plagiarism. I'm accused of cheating on my assignments because due to the color of my skin, my teachers did not think that I was smart enough to make the things that I was making. So when I was writing it and I went back to those moments, it was difficult. What I told myself was, there's a kid right now that's in that classroom right now that feels underserved right now, that feels like they don't have advocates teaching their classes, that feels like their teachers are not people that are places of safety. So I'm like, if we're gonna go in the dark, we're gonna go. The good thing is I'm an adult, so I have money for therapy. I have therapy every Tuesday. So if anything ever gets like too dark, I have community members that'll come like pull me out. But I have to sit in it. Like that's my job. When I decided that this is what I wanted to write and that's what I wanted to make, that's the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. My honest response to this, I know isn't possible for everyone, but I live with a clinical child psychologist. Living with a clinical psychologist while working on this book was really, really helpful. And my agent was the person who I always checked in with if it was getting too heavy. And at one point of writing Louder Than Hunger, I've had a lowercase v since I was like 20, lowercase v voice. But when I was in the thick of my anorexia nervosa, it was a capital V. And at one time while working on Louder Than Hunger, I was digging so deep into myself that it started to turn to a capital V. And I was really, really afraid that I was going to relapse. And thankfully, I'm strong enough and I have enough skills to say, I never want to go back to that. And my agent and my child psychologist are the people who I check in with. So.
Incredible, yeah. I mean, I feel like firmly maybe like community, I feel like is a really strong point there. I think my next question is that Louder Than Hunger is a novel in verse, and so like the entire story is compacted in poems that narrate Jake's sort of character arc and journey. And then Weirdo as a graphic novel, these two are not necessarily like your average like just regular prose books. And as someone who is hugely an advocate for those sort of stories, we need more novels and verses for especially young people, and especially more graphic novels for young people. What made y'all decide that that was the sort of medium that you wanted to take it rather than just a prose book?
Yeah. Let me go first. So in March of 2021, I turned in a book 2 years late. And the book is called The Gift of Story, Exploring the Affective Side of the Reading Life. And in it, I create a framework called the Affective Elements of Story. And I was so happy when I got the email from my editor saying, "You are done with this book." And I said to myself, I'm probably never going to write a book again. But I learned so much about the psychology of story, and I learned so much about myself as a teacher, as a librarian, as a human while writing that book, that the very next day when I was on on a plane going from New York City to Chicago, Jake Stacy started talking to me. And 10 poems came out of me very, very quickly. And very few revisions were done to those 10 poems. And I knew immediately that it was a novel in verse. And something that's so interesting about Louder Than Hunger is it's a big, thick book, all right? But you can read it fairly quickly. And Jake takes up a lot of space on the page, but he has a really hard time taking up space in the world. And I'm so grateful that Candlewick let me publish this brick, because some publishers would have said, we can cut 200 pages, but we couldn't, because we are able to see Jake's OCD better, I think, his anxiety, and I think a novel in verse is the perfect format for a story like this.
I agree.
So I chose graphic novels because when I was growing up, manga and comic books were certainly where I found my place. I think there's something very visually appealing about just sequential art as a medium, but also because as an author, I'm talking to a lot of people, and the graphic novel format lets me talk to multiple audiences at once. So to give you an example, you brought up the Super Smash Brothers reference that's on page 2 of the book. I can guarantee you there are at least 50% of people that are going to read the book, are going to like the book and go, yeah, I enjoyed this. They are not going to catch a Super Smash Brothers reference. So on page 2, the moment we open the book, like we're in Tony's room, right? We're in Tony's room. He has all these like figurines and posters on the wall. And even from that first page, the reason that we need it to be a graphic novel is because the moment you open that book, there are at least 20 communities of people that are going to look at those 2 pages, and they're all going to find something different. And the conclusion that all of them are going to come to is, okay, I'm safe. It's safe for me to be here. So you'll open the book, and one person is going to notice Super Smash Brothers on the TV screen. One person's going to notice a GameCube controller in my hand. One's going to notice a Sonic picture on the wall. One's going to notice a Sailor Moon picture on the wall. One's going to notice a Future Trunks figurine. Everybody's going to find a different thing. And that's my way artistically of saying, like, from the moment you get here, all right, you're good. I got you, okay? If this is where you land, if this is a sub-community that you're part of, I'm with you. I got you. But also, the graphic novel format allows me to communicate things that words wouldn't necessarily be able to show. So one of my favorite components of Weirdo is that every chapter in Weirdo has a color. One of the things that I joke about is that when Weirdo got put on the shelf, I was like, you know, a kid's going to walk in the store and their mom is going to say, okay, you can get one book, and I have to make sure that it's this book instead of Naruto Volume 52. Like that, and that is a tall order. It is very difficult to be able to do that. But I said, what do I have that Naruto doesn't? Color. Naruto doesn't have color. So in every chapter of the book, there's a different color that demonstrates that, like, there's a different color that's like kind of the theme of the book. And for the first chapter of the book, it's red because that's Tony's color. Tony's color is red. That's his kind of like identifying color. Second chapter of the book is green because we talk about gardens and like this concept of personal growth through a metaphor of plants. But in the third chapter, everything cuts to black. All of the color fades out of Tony's world. Everything is in black and white. So from the beginning of the book, you're reading and you're thinking like, yeah, this is just a normal graphic novel. But what you don't know is that I'm like conditioning you to attribute specific colors to specific ideas. So in chapter 3, when he enters that dark place and everything is yanked away from him and it's just the dark, it hits that much harder. And I think it's possible to do something like that in prose. I'm just not talented enough to do it. So, the graphic novel it is.
Oh, that was great.
Great, yeah. Jean, as someone who has included a great grandparent figure in your book, and as someone who also loves writing grandparents in my own YA books, I really just loved the relationship between Jake and his grandmother. And I was just thinking, like, if we could spend like a minute talking about the inspiration behind that and like how that sort of manifested on page, this relationship, and just like in general, how great grandparents are too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I love all the grandmas and grandpas. So my grandma was my best friend as a kid. Jake's grandma is my grandma. I had a complicated relationship with my parents my entire life, and I felt like I could only truly be myself, and I could only breathe when I was at my grandma's house. And during the school year, I had to live with my parents Monday through Thursday, and those were often very challenging days. But I always knew that when I got home from school on Friday, my grandma's red car would be in the driveway, and I knew I was about to have 2 to 3 really, really wonderful days. But as my anorexia nervosa got more complicated and the voice became louder, grandma's house was no longer a safe place either. So yeah, I'm grateful my grandma's in the book. It's dedicated to my grandma. I was always a very anxious child who always tried to rush through everything. And in 1985, my grandma bought me a book called Goofy's Big Race from the grocery store. And I loved at the time you could get a new Disney book every month from the grocery store. And my grandma would always say, slow and steady, steady and slow. That's the way we always go. And that becomes, I think, almost a character in the book. So,
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks for asking about Grandma Ruth.
Absolutely. And Tony, your book is so focused on like seeing and claiming your own power and becoming like a hero in your weirdness and brightness. But I think also you speak so much of the importance of community. And I think maybe like one of my favorite parts about Tony's journey was whenever he makes that friend group that's so eclectic and so humorous. And so I would love like any thoughts on crafting the friend group, crafting Tony's journey towards seeing his empowerment with and alongside other people in that community.
So I want to talk about the weirdos, but can we go back to grandmas real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because listen, I do love talking about grandmas.
Oh, then please.
So my grandmother is although my grandma she's passed away shortly before the events of Weirdo began. But she's kind of like there as a character in this very ethereal way over the course of the book, and it felt really good for me to be able to honor her in that way, because I think that when you're a child, your grandparents are like the coolest thing. But I think that now as an adult, I look back and I just like revere her so much, so much love for her. So the opportunity to kind of put the story on this page of this woman who was a single mother who raised all 3 of her kids by herself, and then started taking care of her grandchildren and still was like kind of a positive and polite force. And I say it in the book, like, my grandmother was a lunch lady for 25 years. And now my mom is a principal in the same district where my grandma was a lunch lady. And now my mom is at like the regional level as like the deputy superintendent of the district where my grandma was a lunch lady. So, in writing Weirdo, it was really important to me to honor her story in that way. But one thing that I can say about any like future Tony Weaver book, grandmas are always safe in Tony Weaver books. It's just like Weirdo is a memoir, so I got to stick with the facts. But in any other book, grandmas are always safe. Okay, if you pick up a Tony Weaver book, you're like, grandma's there. Does anything happen to grandma? Nothing. Good things happen to grandma. Grandma gets to relax and like go sit on the beach. But that's it. That's the only thing that'll be happening in any grandmas and Tony Weaver books. So in Weirdo, Tony kind of starts out alone by himself, and he starts at the school where he's not really being catered to, where his needs aren't really being met. And about halfway through the book, we transition to him being at a new school, smaller school that's a bit closer to home, and also one where he makes this eclectic group of friends called the Literature Club. And I wish that I could say that I kind of sat down and calculated out, hey, here are the key elements and personalities that these characters need to have. But genuinely, the Literature Club, like those were my friends. Like that's we all kind of ran into each other. My mom has a joke because she was a principal as well, and the joke that my mom has is like, you take two kids like you, I can put one of you at the front of the school, I can put one of you at the back of the school, and by the end of the day, you will have found each other. It always happens that way. And it was very important to me to incorporate Weirdo, to incorporate the Literature Club into Weirdo, because I think that there are 10 different variations of Weirdo where someone would write the exact same story, but it's really that we spend 80% of the book finding out all of the different ways that a kid can be bullied and like all of the bad things that can happen to a kid. And then in the last chapter, there's one page where it's like, but remember, there's always light on the other side, the end. And then all of the book reviewers would read it and they'd be like, gripping, timely, important. And I would look at it and be like, this would not help me at all if I was a child. I'm sad right now. I already know how to be sad. I don't need anyone to tell me. I already know that part. How do we get past that part? And the Literature Club works really well as a kind of device for how you grow. We talk to kids a lot about pain. We talk to kids a lot about hurt, but we don't talk to kids a lot about progress, about how it's valid even when it's not linear, about how it's not a journey that we're meant to go on alone, and very much how in my real life, the Literature Club was a very helpful force for me. In Weirdo, we see each member of the Literature Club bring out a different part of Tony that's kind of supportive and helpful for him.
Thank you.